The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with noise. Representatives from 7 major civilizations argued with each other, while holographic displays showed red warning symbols spreading across a star map. Each red symbol marked a system that had gone dark. 3 frontier colonies had been consumed in the past 3 months, and nobody could agree on what to do about it. Admiral Danny Ortega sat in the small observation gallery reserved for human delegates. He watched the chaos below with tired eyes. Humanity had been part of this council for 43 years, but they were still treated like children at an adult table. The other species saw Earth as a small world orbiting an ordinary yellow star. Nothing special. Nothing to worry about. His aide, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Reyes, leaned close and handed him a data tablet. The intelligence reports were worse than the official numbers suggested. The Vara swarm was moving faster than anyone wanted to admit. At their current speed, they would reach populated core systems within 18 months. They're not going to do anything useful, Lisa whispered. They've been arguing for 6 hours. Danny nodded but said nothing. He kept watching. On the main floor, High Speaker Veltos of the Kethari Federation raised his 4 arms to call for order. His species was ancient and proud, with blue skin and eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. They had been exploring the stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. We must establish a defensive perimeter, Veltos announced. Pull back our forces to protected systems and let the Varath exhaust themselves against empty space. The Siluran Trade Ambassador, a creature that looked like a walking crystal formation, clicked in disagreement. Economic pressure is the answer. We cut off all resources to systems near Varath territory. Starve them out. Laughter came from the Draxan delegation. The Draxan were warriors, massive reptilian beings covered in natural armor. Their empire had been fighting the Varath for centuries with limited success. You cannot starve a swarm that eats planets, the Draxan ambassador growled. We recommend strategic withdrawal to fortified positions. Save what we can. Accept our losses. More arguments followed. The insectoid Ven wanted to negotiate. The gas giant dwelling Korath suggested weapons that would destroy entire systems. The silicon-based Mordai simply watched in silence. Their thoughts unreadable. Danny checked the time on his tablet. 7 hours now. 7 hours of talking while the Varath consumed another few thousand lives somewhere in the darkness between stars. Finally, a vote was called. The council agreed to form a joint defensive committee. It would take 6 months to organize, another 3 months to mobilize. By the time they were ready to act, the Varath would have consumed a dozen more systems. Danny stood up. The movement was small, but something about it caught attention. The human admiral walked to the edge of the observation gallery and pressed the button to request speaking rights. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. Veltos looked up with surprise. Humans rarely spoke at council meetings. They were too new, too weak, too unimportant. The chair recognizes the human delegation, Veltos said, with barely hidden amusement. Danny cleared his throat. His voice was calm and steady when he spoke. The Terran government has observed these proceedings with great interest. We understand that the Council needs time to coordinate a proper response to the Varath threat. Several delegates nodded, expecting the usual diplomatic pleasantries. However, Danny continued, humanity cannot wait for a committee that will take 9 months to act. Our colonies are in the path of the swarm. Our people will die while this council debates. The chamber grew quiet. Therefore, the Terran government wishes to inform the council that we will handle the Varath problem ourselves. We ask only that other species stay out of our way. Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then the Draxan ambassador burst into harsh laughter. Others joined him. The sound filled the great chamber like thunder. Handle it yourself? The Draxan mocked. Humanity has perhaps a dozen warships. The Vorath number in the millions. What will you do? Throw rocks at them? The Siluran ambassador's crystals chimed with amusement. Perhaps the humans will bore the swarm to death with their primitive broadcasts. Danny waited for the laughter to fade. His expression never changed. When the chamber was quiet again, he simply nodded once and turned to leave. Lisa fell into step beside him as they walked toward the exit. Behind them, the alien delegates returned to their arguments, dismissing the human statement as the foolish pride of a young species. But High Speaker Velthos did not laugh. He watched the human admiral leave with a strange feeling in his chest. He had lived for over 300 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had learned to recognize the moments when history changed direction. Something in the human's eyes troubled him. Within 1 hour of Danny's departure, Velthos received reports from his intelligence services. Human communication channels had gone dark. Encrypted signals were bouncing between Earth, Luna, Mars, and a dozen other human installations. Ships that had been dormant in space docks were suddenly powering up their engines. Similar reports came from other delegations. The Siluran merchant network noticed unusual activity in human trading posts. The Draxan military observers reported that human patrol vessels were abandoning their normal routes and heading towards central rally points. Velthos sat alone in his quarters, aboard the station, and tried to understand what he was seeing. Humanity was a small species. Their technology was crude compared to older civilizations. Their military was a joke by galactic standards, and yet every major intelligence agency in the galaxy was now scrambling to figure out what the humans were planning. The High Speaker pulled up everything he could find about humanity, their history, their wars, their strange combination of creativity and violence. He read about their world wars, their cold wars, their endless conflicts over resources and ideas. He read about how they had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times, but always found a way to survive. One phrase kept appearing in the records. Different languages, different eras, but always the same idea. When pushed too far, humans did not retreat. They did not negotiate. They did not surrender. They got angry. Velthos closed the files and stared at the wall of his quarters. He thought about the look in Admiral Ortega's eyes. Not pride, not arrogance. Something colder, something patient. The High Speaker drafted a message to his government. It contained only a few words, but they would change the political calculations of an entire civilization. The humans are no longer asking for permission. Recommend immediate reassessment of threat priorities. The Vorath may not be our biggest concern anymore. He sent the message and waited in the darkness of his room. Somewhere out there, humanity was moving. And for the first time in his long life, Velthos felt genuinely afraid of a species he had dismissed as insignificant. President Kevin Marsh stood at the podium of the United Nations Emergency Assembly. Every seat was filled. Every camera was recording. Every human being with access to a screen was watching. This was the moment that would define their species for generations to come. "My fellow humans," Kevin began, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to say. "For 43 years, we have been part of the galactic community. We have been polite. We have been patient. We have followed the rules that older species created long before we reached the stars." He paused and looked across the assembly hall. Leaders from every nation sat in silence. Old enemies sat beside old friends. For this moment, there were no borders. The Vara swarm is coming. The Galactic Council has chosen to form committees and hold debates while millions die. They have made their choice. Now we must make ours. Kevin pressed a button on the podium. Behind him, a massive screen lit up with images that had been classified for decades. shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, weapons factories buried beneath lunar craters, research stations in the outer reaches of the solar system where no alien observer had ever been allowed to visit. Project Blackout has been active for 31 years. Every nation represented in this hall has contributed. Every human with a job in manufacturing, in mining, in research, has unknowingly played a part. We built this in secret because we knew that someday the galaxy would fail us, and we would have to protect ourselves. The assembly erupted in murmurs. Some delegates looked shocked. Others nodded as if they had always suspected. A few wiped tears from their eyes. The vote took only 12 minutes. For the first time in human history, every nation agreed to pool their military forces under a single command. The Terran Defense Initiative was born. 6 hours later, Commander Samantha Cole arrived at the Luna shipyards. She had commanded patrol vessels for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for what she saw when her shuttle approached the hidden dry docks. Ships. Dozens of them. Warships that had been officially decommissioned years ago sat in perfect condition, their hulls gleaming under work lights. Other vessels had no official records at all. They were ghosts, built in secret and hidden from every alien sensor network. Her executive officer, Lieutenant Ben Howard, stood beside her at the viewport. His mouth hung open. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "The budget reports, the inspections, the alien observers. How did we hide all of this?" Samantha allowed herself a small smile. Humans are very good at keeping secrets when we have to. Every shipping manifest that said we were moving grain was actually moving steel. Every mining operation that reported losses was actually stockpiling materials. We have been building this fleet piece by piece for 3 decades. She moved to the command center of the shipyard, where technicians were already preparing the vessels for departure. The largest ship in the fleet floated at the center of the formation, the Resolute. It was the first of a new class of warship designed specifically for the kind of fight that was coming. Samantha touched the viewport glass and studied her new command. The Resolute was not elegant like Cathari vessels. It was not massive like Draxan dreadnoughts. It was built for one purpose only: to kill things and survive the process. On Mars, reserve units received activation orders. Men and women who had served their time and returned to civilian life put on uniforms again. They kissed their families goodbye and boarded transport ships that would take them to rally points across human space. In the asteroid belt, mining operations that had been producing metals for construction suddenly changed their output. Weapons-grade materials flowed toward the inner system in quantities that would have alarmed the entire galaxy if anyone had been paying attention. But nobody was paying attention. That was the point. Intelligence Officer Greg Patterson coordinated the information war from a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. His team had spent years placing operatives throughout galactic civilization. Human traders, human diplomats, human tourists who happened to be very good at listening. Now all of those assets activated at once. False reports flooded alien intelligence networks. The Siluran heard that humanity was building a defensive wall around Earth. The Draxan received information suggesting that humans were negotiating surrender terms with the Varth. The Cathari intercepted communications, indicating that the human fleet was experiencing mechanical failures. None of it was true. All of it was believed. Greg watched his screens with satisfaction. The galaxy had always underestimated humans. They saw a young species with crude technology and assumed that meant they were stupid. They never considered that humans might be playing a longer game. Across human space, the pieces moved into position. Transport ships carried soldiers and supplies to staging areas. Carrier vessels loaded fighter craft and attack drones. Support ships stocked medical supplies, ammunition, and enough food to sustain a campaign that might last months or years. Commander Cole held her first briefing aboard the Resolute. Her senior officers gathered in the war room, their faces serious but determined. She pulled up a holographic map of Varth-controlled space. "The swarm thinks in patterns," she explained. "They are a hive mind. Every ship, every creature, every cell is connected to a central intelligence. This makes them powerful, but it also makes them predictable." She highlighted several star systems on the map. These are their main breeding grounds. These are their supply lines. And this, deep in the heart of their territory, is where we believe the Overmind is located. The brain that controls everything. Lieutenant Howard raised his hand. "Our mission is to destroy the Overmind?" Samantha shook her head. "Our mission is to destroy the Varth. All of them. The Overmind is just how we finish the job." The officers exchanged glances. This was not a defensive campaign. This was not a limited strike. Humanity was going to war with the intention of wiping an entire species from existence. "I know what you're thinking," Samantha continued. "This sounds extreme. Maybe it is. But the Varth do not negotiate. They do not make peace. They consume everything they encounter until nothing is left. We either destroy them completely, or they will eventually destroy us." She looked at each officer in turn. "The galaxy thinks we are weak. They think we are foolish for trying this. Let them think whatever they want. When this is over, they will understand what humanity is capable of when we stop being polite." The fleet departed Luna 3 days later. 47 warships, 200 support vessels, and over 60,000 soldiers began the journey toward Varth space. Behind them, Earth continued its normal routines. People went to work, children went to school. Life continued as if nothing unusual was happening. But everyone knew. Everyone watched the stars at night and thought about the men and women traveling into the darkness. Everyone hoped they would come home. High Speaker Velthos received a communication from Admiral Ortega shortly after the fleet departed. It contained coordinates and a date. Nothing else. An invitation to observe. Velthos stared at the message for a long time. Then he ordered his fastest ship prepared for departure. Whatever was about to happen, he needed to see it with his own eyes. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. He was not sure they were ready for the lesson. The Epsilon Vega system had been dead for 3 weeks. The Varth had consumed every living thing on its 4 habitable worlds and turned the planets into breeding grounds. Now millions of bioships floated in the darkness, waiting for the signal to move toward the next target. The swarm detected the human fleet when it emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Over 10,000 bioships turned their attention toward this new arrival. They were not worried. They had destroyed larger fleets before. The Draxan had sent armadas against them, and the Draxan had lost. These newcomers were smaller, weaker. Their ships were made of dead metal instead of living tissue. They would be easy prey. Commander Samantha Cole stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched the swarm approaching on her tactical display. Each red dot represented a Varth bioship. Each bioship contained thousands of creatures ready to tear through hull plating and consume the crew inside. "Contact in 30 minutes, Lieutenant Ben Howard reported from his station. "They're coming straight at us. No tactical formation, just a wall of bodies." Samantha nodded. This was exactly what she expected. The Varth did not think like individual creatures. They were extensions of a single mind, and that mind had never encountered anything it could not overwhelm with sheer numbers. Today, that would change. "Signal the fleet," Samantha ordered. "All ships to defensive formation. Launch drone carriers on my mark." Throughout the fleet, crews prepared for battle. Soldiers checked their weapons. Engineers monitored reactor outputs. Pilots climbed into fighter craft and waited in launch bays. Everyone knew what was at stake. Everyone understood that the next few hours would determine whether humanity survived or joined the long list of species the Vorath had consumed. High Speaker Veltos watched from his observation vessel, positioned far from the battle zone. Several other alien delegations had sent ships to observe as well. The Draxan wanted to see the humans fail so they could feel better about their own defeats. The Siluran wanted to calculate the economic impact of the coming slaughter. The Kithari simply wanted to understand. The Vorath made first contact in the way they always did. A psychic pulse rippled across space, trying to connect with the minds aboard the human vessels. This was their standard tactic. They would establish a mental link with their prey, flood their thoughts with fear and confusion, and then move in for the kill. The pulse hit the human fleet. Nothing happened. On the bridge of the Resolute, Samantha felt a slight pressure behind her eyes, and then it was gone. Around her, crew members blinked and shook their heads as if clearing away a mild headache. Psychic attack ineffective, Ben reported with a hint of surprise in his voice. All ships reporting minimal effect. Samantha allowed herself a small smile. This was the result of 30 years of secret research. Human scientists had studied Vorath biology, captured specimens when possible, and developed countermeasures that no other species possessed. The human brain, it turned out, was uniquely difficult for the Vorath to penetrate. With proper training and chemical supplements, that natural resistance became almost complete immunity. The swarm paused. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered prey that did not respond to their primary weapon. Confusion rippled through the hive mind. "Launch drones," Samantha commanded. From carrier ships throughout the fleet, thousands of unmanned vessels poured into space. They were small, cheap, and completely expendable. Each one carried a payload designed specifically for this moment. The drones accelerated toward the swarm at speeds no crewed vessel could match. The Vorath bioships moved to intercept, but the drones were too fast and too numerous. They plunged directly into the heart of the swarm formation, and then they exploded. The payloads were not traditional weapons. They were disruptors, designed to interfere with the psychic signals that connected the hive mind. Each explosion created a bubble of interference that cut individual bioships off from the collective consciousness. For the first time in their existence, Vorath creatures experienced isolation. Velthos leaned forward in his observation seat, his four hands gripping the armrests. He had seen many battles in his long life, but he had never seen anything like this. The Vorath swarm, always perfectly coordinated, suddenly became chaotic. Bioships collided with each other. Attack formations fell apart. Individual creatures that had never thought for themselves suddenly had to make their own decisions. They did not know how. "All ships advance," Samantha ordered. "Target isolated clusters. Show them what human weapons can do." The Terran fleet moved forward in tight formation. Their weapons were not elegant. They did not use the sophisticated energy beams favored by older civilizations. Human ships used kinetic projectiles, nuclear warheads, and directed plasma bursts. Cool technology by galactic standards, but effective. The first volley tore through of disoriented bioships. Armor that could withstand particle weapons shattered under the impact of metal slugs moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Nuclear detonations vaporized organic tissue that had evolved to resist energy attacks. The Vorath had never faced an enemy that fought like this. The battle lasted 9 hours. Samantha rotated her crews in shifts, keeping fresh operators at every station. She directed the fleet with calm precision, exploiting every weakness in the swarm's disrupted formation. When the Vorath tried to regroup, she sent more drones to break them apart again. When they tried to flee, she pursued. Human soldiers did not fight like other species. They did not stop when they had an advantage. They pushed harder. By the end of the battle, over 6,000 Vorath bioships had been destroyed. Human losses stood at 4 vessels, all unmanned drones that had completed their missions before being caught in crossfire. Samantha surveyed the battlefield on her display. Debris from destroyed bioships filled the system. The survivors of the swarm had scattered in every direction, their connection to the hive mind still disrupted by lingering interference. "Send a message to the observation vessels," she ordered. "Tell them the show is over for today, but let them know we're just getting started." Velthos received the message in his quarters aboard the observation ship. His hands trembled as he watched the battle recordings for the 3rd time. He had seen the Draxan Empire struggle against the Vorath for centuries. Their greatest victories had been costly draws. Their defeats had been catastrophic. The humans had just achieved in 9 hours what his entire civilization had failed to accomplish in generations. He drafted a message to the Galactic Council. The words came slowly because he was still trying to process what he had witnessed. "We have made a terrible miscalculation about the humans. They are not a young species stumbling through the stars. They are predators who have been pretending to be prey. The Vorath may be the immediate threat, but I believe we need to reconsider our entire understanding of humanity. They have capabilities we never suspected, and they have just demonstrated a willingness to use those capabilities with a level of aggression that should concern every civilization in the galaxy." He sent the message and sat in darkness, thinking about what he had seen. The humans had not just won a battle. They had announced their arrival as a major power in a way that could not be ignored. Every species that had ever laughed at human diplomats, every civilization that had dismissed Earth as insignificant, would now have to recalculate. Velthos was old enough to know how these calculations usually ended. When a new power emerged, the established powers either accommodated them or tried to destroy them before they grew too strong. He wondered which path the galaxy would choose, and he wondered if it would even matter, given what the humans had just proven they could do. The Galactic Council expected humanity to consolidate its victory. Every other species in history had done the same after winning a major battle. They would establish defensive positions, secure their borders, and negotiate from a position of strength. Commander Samantha Cole had different orders. 3 days after the Battle of Epsilon Vega, the Terran Expeditionary Fleet jumped to the next Vorath-controlled system. And the next. And the next. Humanity was not interested in defense. They were hunting. Captain Ryan Delgado led the ground operations on Corvath Prime, a world the Vorath had conquered 6 months earlier. The breeding pools still contained millions of developing creatures. In a few weeks, they would mature and join the swarm, replacing the losses from Epsilon Vega. They never got the chance. Ryan's Marines descended on the planet in armored dropships. They wore powered exoskeletons that multiplied their strength and protected them from the acid blood of Vorath warriors. Their weapons fired rounds designed to shatter organic armor and spread chemical agents that disrupted Vorath's cellular structure. The fighting was brutal. Vorath defenders threw themselves at the human lines with mindless ferocity. They did not fear death because they were not truly individuals. They were extensions of the hive, and the hive cared only about survival of the collective. But human soldiers had trained for this. They had spent years in simulators fighting virtual Vorath, learning their patterns, understanding their weaknesses. When a warrior charged, they knew exactly where to aim. When a swarm tried to overwhelm a position, they knew how to fall back and create kill zones. By the end of the day, the breeding pools of Corvath Prime were burning. Millions of developing Vorath died before they ever saw the stars. Ryan watched the fires from a ridge overlooking the main valley and felt nothing but grim satisfaction. His orders were clear. No mercy, no prisoners, no survivors. In orbit, Lieutenant Megan Torres commanded fighter squadrons that swept through asteroid fields filled with dormant bioships. The Vorath used these asteroids as hiding places, keeping reserves in stasis until they were needed. Megan's pilots moved through the fields with methodical precision, destroying each dormant ship before it could wake. It was not glorious work. There were no dramatic battles, no clever maneuvers. Just careful, systematic destruction. The pilots joked that they were exterminators, and the joke was closer to truth than anyone wanted to admit. The Galactic Council sent urgent messages to the human fleet. High Speaker Velthos personally recorded an appeal asking Commander Cole to pause the offensive and open negotiations. The Vorath, he argued, were becoming desperate. Cornered creatures were unpredictable. A wounded swarm might lash out in ways that could affect neutral systems. Samantha read the message in her quarters aboard the Resolute. She understood the concern. The Vorath had never faced an enemy that pursued them like this. They did not know how to respond. Their usual tactics of overwhelming numbers and psychic assault had failed. Their breeding grounds were being destroyed one by one. Their reserves were being eliminated before they could activate. She drafted a response and sent it through Admiral Ortega back on Earth. Humanity does not leave threats half-finished. The Vorath have consumed billions of lives across hundreds of systems. They will continue consuming until nothing is left. We have the ability to end this threat permanently. We will not stop because the Council is uncomfortable with our methods. The response spread through the galaxy within hours. Every major civilization received a copy through their intelligence networks. The implications were clear. Humanity was not following galactic conventions. They were not interested in negotiated settlements or limited victories. They wanted extinction. Intelligence officer Greg Patterson tracked the reactions from his bunker on Earth. The Siluran Trade Consortium began quietly shifting their investments away from systems near human space. The Draxan Empire mobilized additional forces along their borders, officially to prepare for Vorath refugees, but actually to create a buffer against potential human expansion. Most interesting of all, the Draxan ambassador made a private approach to human representatives. He expressed admiration for the Terran campaign and suggested that perhaps the two species had more in common than previously believed. A mutual defense treaty might benefit both civilizations. Greg forwarded the communication to the President with a note suggesting they take the offer seriously. The Draxan were warriors who respected strength. Having them as allies rather than potential enemies could be valuable in the years ahead. The Kethari response was more complex. High Speaker Velthos traveled to Earth for a private meeting with Admiral Ortega. They met in a secure room beneath the Pacific Ocean, far from any possible surveillance. "I have watched the recordings of your battles many times," Velthos said. His translator device rendered his words in flat English, but Danny could sense the emotion beneath them. "I have studied your tactics, your weapons, your soldiers. And I have one question." Danny waited. "How long have you been preparing for this?" The Admiral considered his answer carefully. The Kethari were not enemies, but they were not friends either. They were the oldest and most influential species in the galaxy. What he said in this room would shape relations between their civilizations for generations. "Since the day we first learned that we were not alone in the universe," Danny finally said, "we hoped we would never need these preparations. We believed that the galaxy might be peaceful, that other species might welcome us as partners. But hope is not a strategy." Velthos nodded slowly. "You expected us to fail you. We expected that someday, somewhere, something would threaten our survival. And when that day came, we would not be able to rely on anyone but ourselves." Danny met the alien's gaze directly. "Were we wrong?" The High Speaker did not answer. He did not need to. Back in Vorath space, the campaign continued. System by system, world by world, the Terran fleet advanced deeper into enemy territory. They destroyed breeding grounds, eliminated reserves, and hunted down every fleeing bioship they could find. Samantha received regular reports from her intelligence officers. The Vorath hive mind was showing signs of strain. Communication between distant clusters was becoming erratic. Some bioships were making decisions that made no tactical sense, suggesting that the central intelligence was losing control of its peripheral units. The swarm was dying, and they knew it. The final report came 3 weeks into the campaign. Human scouts had located the Overmind. It was hidden in a heavily fortified system at the heart of Vorath territory, surrounded by the largest concentration of bioships ever recorded. Millions of them, drawn from every corner of their territory, gathered to protect the one thing they could not afford to lose. Samantha called a meeting of her senior officers. They studied the intelligence data in the war room, calculating force requirements and casualty projections. "This will be the hardest fight yet," she told them. "The Overmind knows we're coming. It will throw everything it has at us. We should expect to lose ships. We should expect to lose people." Lieutenant Howard spoke up. "Is there another way? If we've already crippled their breeding capacity, maybe we can just contain them. Let them die out naturally over a few generations." Samantha shook her head. "The Overmind is intelligent. If we give it time, it will adapt. It will find new strategies. It will rebuild. The only way to end this threat permanently is to kill it." She looked around the table at the officers who had followed her into the darkest reaches of space. They were tired. They had seen things that would haunt them forever. But their eyes were steady. "Prepare the fleet," Samantha ordered. "We finish this." The Terran Expeditionary Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Overmind system, and for a moment, even Commander Samantha Cole felt her confidence waver. The space ahead was filled with bioships. Not thousands, not tens of thousands. Millions of them, packed so densely that they blocked the light of distant stars. The Vorath had gathered everything they had left to protect their central intelligence. Every surviving bioship, every creature that could fight, every resource they could spare had been pulled back to this single point. If the humans wanted to destroy the Overmind, they would have to fight through the largest defensive force ever assembled. Samantha studied the tactical display and made her calculations. The numbers were not in their favor. For the first time in this campaign, the humans were genuinely outnumbered. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "This is going to be different from our other engagements. We cannot simply overwhelm them with disruption drones. There are too many. We will have to punch through their lines and reach the core before they can regroup." The fleet arranged itself into an arrow formation, with the heaviest warships at the front and lighter vessels protected in the center. The Resolute took point, its reinforced hull designed to absorb punishment that would destroy lesser ships. The Vorath attacked the moment the humans began their advance. Bioships swarmed from every direction, their acid weapons and organic projectiles raining against human shields. The drone carriers launched their payloads, but the disruption effect was diluted across such a massive force. Some Vorath went silent, but millions more maintained their connection to the hive mind. Captain Tony Marsh commanded the forward assault group. His ship, the Defiant, was one of the oldest vessels in the fleet, a warship that had officially been scrapped 15 years ago. Now it plunged into the heart of the swarm, its weapons firing continuously at any target within range. "Hull breach on Deck 7, his damage control officer reported. "Vorath boarders entering through the gap." Tony did not hesitate. "Seal that section and vent it to space." Anyone who didn't make it out, they knew the risks. It was a brutal decision, but there was no time for anything else. The ship kept advancing, leaving behind the bodies of crew members who had been caught in the compromised section. Throughout the fleet, similar scenes played out. Ships took damage that should have destroyed them, but their crews kept them flying through sheer determination. Engineers worked in compartments filling with toxic smoke. Soldiers fought hand-to-hand against Vorath creatures that broke through hull breaches. Medical staff treated wounds while the deck shook from weapons impacts. Chief Engineer Nicole Santos aboard the Resolute performed miracles. When a Vorath acid blast melted through the primary power coupling, she rerouted the entire energy grid through secondary systems in under 4 minutes. When the shield generators began to fail, she personally climbed into the maintenance shafts and replaced damaged components while the ship was still under fire. "How are we doing?" Samantha asked during a brief lull in the fighting. Nicole's voice came through the communicator, rough from smoke inhalation. "The ship is held together with emergency welds and prayers, Commander, but should get you where you need to go." The human fleet punched through the outer defensive rings, leaving destroyed bioships in their wake. But they paid a price. 12 vessels had been lost, their crews either dead or captured by the swarm. Another 20 were heavily damaged and struggling to maintain formation. Sergeant Kate Rivera held a breach point on the Resolute's lower decks. Vorath warriors poured through a hole in the hull, their claws scraping against metal as they climbed toward her position. She had run out of ammunition for her rifle 20 minutes ago. Now she fought with a plasma cutter taken from an engineering kit, burning through any creature that came within reach. "Where's our backup?" Someone shouted from behind her. Kate did not turn around. She could not afford to take her eyes off the breach. "Backup is busy. We hold until they're not." She held for another 40 minutes. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found her standing over a pile of dead Vorath, the plasma cutter still glowing in her hands. She had not moved from her position. The fleet reached the core of the Vorath system. After 18 hours of continuous fighting, the Overmind waited there, not in a ship, but in the heart of a living structure the size of a small moon. Organic tendrils connected it to every bioship in the system, feeding it information and receiving commands in return. Samantha looked at the structure on her display and felt a moment of strained respect. The Vorath were monsters, but the Overmind was undeniably impressive. It had coordinated a species across hundreds of light years. It had consumed civilizations that were ancient when humanity was young, and now it was going to die. "All ships, target the central structure. Launch everything we have left." The surviving warships unleashed their remaining weapons. Kinetic rounds, nuclear warheads, plasma bursts, everything the fleet could throw. The Overmind's defenses absorbed the first volleys, organic shields hardening against the assault. But the humans did not stop. They kept firing wave after wave, wearing down the defenses through sheer persistence. More ships were destroyed in the assault. More crews died. But the survivors kept attacking. Finally, the shields failed. The nuclear payloads detonated inside the Overmind's core. The explosion was visible from every corner of the system, a flash of light that briefly outshone the local star, and then silence. Every Vorath bioship in the system went still simultaneously. The psychic network that connected them collapsed in an instant. Individual creatures, suddenly cut off from the mind that had their every action, simply stopped functioning. Some drifted. Some collided with each other. Some turned their weapons on themselves in confusion. The Vorath species, which had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years, died in the space of a few minutes. Commander Cole broadcast a message to the Galactic Council. Her voice was tired, but there was quiet pride beneath the exhaustion. The Vorath threat has been neutralized. Humanity is returning home. The victory celebration on Earth lasted for weeks. Soldiers were welcomed as heroes. The names of those who died were inscribed on monuments. President Kevin Marsh addressed the world, speaking of sacrifice and courage and the price of survival. But in the halls of power across the galaxy, The mood was very different. High Speaker Velthos convened an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The topic was not the Varth. The topic was humanity. "We have watched the humans accomplish what we could not," he said to the assembled delegates. "They have demonstrated capabilities we never suspected. They have shown a willingness to pursue total war to its conclusion. And perhaps most concerning of all, they have done this efficiently, with losses far below what any of our projections suggested." The Draxan ambassador nodded gravely. "Our military analysts have revised their threat assessments. Humanity is no longer considered a minor power. They are now rated as a Tier 1 threat, equal to any civilization in this chamber." The Siluran representative's crystals chimed nervously. "What do we do? Do we attempt to limit their expansion? Do we form alliances against them?" Velthos raised his four hands for silence. "I do not believe that confrontation is wise. The humans have just proven what happens when they decide to eliminate a threat. I do not wish to become their next target." He pulled up a recording of his private meeting with Admiral Ortega. The human's words played for the chamber. "Since the day we first learned that we were not alone in the universe." Hope is not a strategy. The delegates listened in silence. "The humans have been preparing for galactic war since before they joined this council," Velthos continued. "They hid their true capabilities while appearing weak. They studied us, learned our strengths and weaknesses, and built countermeasures for every threat they identified. The Varth were simply the first test of their preparations." He let that sink in before continuing. "We now face a choice. We can treat humanity as enemies and begin an arms race that will likely end in disaster. Or we can accept that the galaxy has a new major power and find ways to work together." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was never really in doubt. The humans had made their position clear. They were willing to be friends. They were willing to be partners. But they would never again be weak. Admiral Ortega received the Council's response a week later. They proposed a new treaty, one that would give humanity a permanent seat at the highest levels of galactic government. Full voting rights. Full access to shared resources. Full recognition as a major civilization. Danny read the proposal in his office on Earth. Outside his window, children played in a park, unaware of the negotiations that would shape their future. He thought about everything humanity had sacrificed to reach this moment. The secrets they had kept, the lives they had lost, the innocence they could never reclaim. But they had survived, and they had proven something that the galaxy would never forget. When humanity said they would handle something, they meant it. Danny signed the treaty and sent it back to the Council. Then he poured himself a drink and watched the sun set over a world that was finally truly safe. For now.